always carve it out a little bit more.
We're at 6:01. Okay, can you start recording?
Alright.
Oh, nice. Okay. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, May 14th, 2025 meeting of the Tenino Planning Commission. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. Okay, let's take a look at the minutes from the April 9th meeting.
I move to approve I approve the minutes of the last meeting. That was something.
I'll second approving the minutes of the last meeting as presented.
Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's look at tonight's agenda.
Do we need to approve the agenda?
Yep.
Let's try this one again. I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Don't have any members of the public for comment. Adam, do you want to give us a report?
Sure. Okay, so this is kind of from last month's meeting. I think it was April. Yeah, so April 22nd. One of City Councilman O'Callahan would like to have bits of the comprehensive plan presented to the City Council as we approve them. I've mentioned that we're on track to approve everything at the same time, and he said that was difficult to review all at once, and so he would like it in parts. That was the extent of the conversation. I think we had that conversation with the previous staff.
We did.
From SCJ, but wanted to bring that back up again because he brought it up to me. So I don't know. Is that something that we can do? Present 2 or 3, maybe 2 sections at a time, or something.
By chapters.
Okay.
Typically, we'll do 2 to 3, depending on how long the chapter is. So, like land use is obviously a lot longer of a chapter, so we'll usually wrap that with something like a lot shorter chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of pick and choose, combine them to what's actually going to be about the same time frame each time. But yeah, that's not a heavy lift.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. All right. And then so just for my own personal timeline, we're still looking at having things pretty much finalized by next month or July.
Yes, for the most part. The climate plan is slightly separate because it has its own grant. So we'll have everything else in a final draft form for you guys to review. And I say final draft, but it's very much still a talking point of what we would like to see, anything like we forgot, anything like that. But it will all be in one actual document. And you know me, with all of the color coding, you'll have tabs. And then once we kind of get to that point, then what I'm planning on doing for the climate element, we have another planner that has worked on quite a few of them, and so they're going to help me out with the climate. And we'll kind of finalize that on a slightly different timeline. But we're going to rope that in by proxy. Essentially, we're going to put language in the climate element that will adopt the climate plan once we get to that point, so that we don't have to go back and re-adopt or essentially re-adopt the comp plan. So.
Okay. And then, so when would the whole thing go to the City Council for approval?
Depending on what our discussion looks like in June, sometime in June or July.
Okay.
So it'll start going there probably late June, depending on when the next City Council, I have to look up the.
Sure.
But probably about June, July.
So I have a question, if I can.
Mhm.
So I know, like, the county has had 4 or 5 public hearings on the comp plan. Is the, like, at the planning commission level, is the planning commission here going to have any public hearings before we move forward?
Yes, we will. We legally have to, for all of the contracts and everything too. So we will do that. It's just essentially, I will get all of the noticing out to, city staff to make sure that that part is all done. And then it's almost like a regular, session, except for that we open it to public comment, for the specific, hearing.
Gotcha.
So it should be pretty straightforward.
And that's next month, or that's in the future?
It was the plan that it would be probably July.
Okay.
That week, because then what essentially will happen is I will bring you a mostly final draft next month. July, we would actually have the public hearing, make any kind of final changes, get the comments and things like that, and then actually get your formal recommendation to city council, while also taking it to city council for them to review before we ask for their formal consideration and adoption. Because it still has to, after that, it'll still have to go to, for GMA compliance, there's a 60-day commerce review, and so essentially, as soon as city council goes, yeah, this looks pretty good, we really like this is where it's at, then I'll send it over to commerce for their 60-day review, and then it'll go back to city council for their final adoption once everything is actually, reviewed by, all state agencies. Well, not all of them, but all the ones that matter in this process. Let me put that in this process.
Perfect.
Okay.
Cool.
Any more questions about the comp plan public hearing? No?
I think so.
Okay, we don't have a public hearing tonight, so let's continue with our comp plan discussion.
So for tonight, what you have in front of you is the results for the community survey as of today. It is still open, and we can receive more responses. We've actually received quite a few. We've received about 83. Ignore the 50 or the complete versus partial for the most part, because from what I've seen, most everybody answered most of the questions. It was just that last question, like, do you have anything? Do you want us to contact you? And if they don't put anything, then it says it's partial. So, but we did get really good responses so far. We've gotten a lot of feedback, which is really good, and it's something that we can absolutely take into account and consideration, and will by proxy. I say that because it's more you guys than me going forward. So I did do a little synopsis in regard to what the overview looks like. So it looks like the top community priorities were maintaining a safe community, improving streets and intersections, supporting a vibrant commercial downtown, preserving historic buildings and promoting historic character, and improving infrastructure and services. So for me as a planner, nothing is really shocking by any of that. But curious if you guys have any questions, or if that's interesting information, or if you have any thoughts.
I think we were just saying the same exact thing. There's
Yeah.
nothing surprising
That's surprising.
in some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the hard part when it comes to the comp plan is, like, a lot of this is already going to be incorporated, but it's more of the strategic thinking and process after the comp plan's actually put in place of how does the city council actually get this done. And I think that's the part that I struggle with the comp plan, because it's just a visioning document where we just kind of lay out what the community wants, and it helps guide how we ask for money and how we kind of do a strategic plan. But unless there's a lot of actions afterwards, it's just a visioning document.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Typically we'll, some communities choose to put in a, like an implementation, section of, like, the guiding document for all, really adoption processes through the city. So if I wanted to, or not me, but if city council wanted to change some of the rules and regulations in the zoning or the development code, we would have to reference the comp plan and say, this aligns with this goal. If it doesn't align with any goal, then I have no reasoning to back up this adoption or this proposal. So everything has to go back to that, like, this is where it fits in with our comp plan. That is a lot more of like the planning level of like understanding of it. But you're right, it is overall a visioning document, and we can absolutely talk about an implementation process or some sort of verbiage in there that's usually like 1 page of just some ideas of how to better implement it, just so that, you know, maybe it's more community engagement, more maybe it's just making sure that you know, all new city staff like understand what the actual vision and goals are for the city. Things like that really help and go a long way, and we can put verbiage in there if that's something you guys are interested in.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Could explore some of the possibilities, maybe
Yeah.
get some examples from, you know, other communities or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of the biggest barriers to progress was a lack of funding, poor leadership or planning, community resistance to change, lack of vision and staff capacity, and poor infrastructure and high utility costs. So, I mean, for me, it seems like the biggest things are a concern regarding funding, which is always a concern, and that people aren't seeing our leadership or our planning commission or planning staff or, you know, our city staff actively out there trying to engage. That's usually where that comes in, because we are, right? It's just they're not seeing it. But also curious your thoughts.
Well, working for the government, I can 100% understand that, because a lot of it, unless it's in your face every single day, they don't see it.
Mhm.
But it would be interesting to see how, like, we could in that implementation conversation of like how we could talk about communication strategy or like sharing that story a little bit, because everyone knows like the historical context of the city, but like how can we show and share like how the comp plan is like protecting the historic part but also allowing change in other parts, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought about the communication side of things, right?
Yeah.
Because you could be doing great things, but if nobody's like, you know, in comprehensive plan, I mean, to somebody who's simply, you know, living in Tenino, we all, you know, go to the grocery store, we go home, we go a couple different places in town. Like, the comprehensive plan is not going to hit you on a daily basis,
Yeah.
like in any way. So, yeah, some sort of communication of, hey, here's the vision, right? Because one of these things was lack of vision. Here's the vision going forward, and here's how we plan to get there. Even if it's just a presentation of this is what we have in the comprehensive plan. It's not even necessarily like this is going to happen. It's just simply a presentation of, hey, this is kind of what we've got.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting in the, like, is there any other thoughts that you'd like to contribute? The very last question. A lot of them were like, thank you for like putting in this time to like survey the community, or like, thanks for asking us our thoughts, or like this one says, thank you so much for doing this. I hope you get a good response rate. Like, just the fact that usually people don't respond that way if they feel like they're being berated with questions. So like maybe doing somehow like implementing grant dependent or like whatever it looks like, implementing some sort of like community survey once a year when we like go through the comprehensive like annual update or something like that. Cause then it could be like, okay, here's what the comp plan says. Are we aligning with any of like that, or is the community feel like we're missing something?
And I think that's probably a really great idea, first off, because just like William was saying, like, hey, why is there not a basketball hoop over at the
Yeah.
park, right? I don't play basketball, so I've never really thought of like a basketball hoop over at the park. I'm just go there and I'm like, wow, this is great. Like, there's stuff for kids. There's like baseball fields. We walk the trail, so like that's all we care about, as long as the trail's like good to go.
I mean, the park is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
to have that here and have the pool and have, it's beautiful and,
Mhm.
you know, central in every way, and just crossed my mind. Someone had mentioned it in one of the responses here about a basketball hoop, and I was like,
Yeah. Well, I think it's great.
I was kind
Okay. Well, there we go.
Nice.
So yeah. Anyway, but you don't know unless people tell you,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes, I know for me, sometimes I'm stuck in my own bubble, and I don't really know kind of what could be the best thing here. But if you start asking people questions, oftentimes they've been thinking about something that they'd really enjoy.
Yeah.
So
I also had a thought in regards to that, especially like core infrastructure, usually it means like potholes. But like a lot of people don't think about the fact that we utilize these roads every day when we're driving home, right? But you don't think about it until you hit that pothole. You don't
Yes.
think about it until the utility is sunken into the road and then or raised. That's a big problem in like tumwater. It's like you end up jumping over them almost. And so like you don't think about those things until you run into the issue. And so like think about all of the things or all of the infrastructure that's within the city is that core, but it makes us think critically in regard to, okay, are we actually looking at this or not?
Yeah, I think I've seen it happen. I lived in Portland for a long time in St. John's, and I watched that get changed, that community get changed, kind of just by the infrastructure changing, right? Like the roads, the sidewalks, the crosswalks, the way they sort of had the pedestrian in mind, going from 4 lanes to 3, bike lanes. And it all kind of happened piece by piece, going towards the center of the city or going out from it. And you could see the businesses start to grow and start to happen. And I think like the blueprint is here for that, like it seems like, what are the top priorities? Safe community, well, doing something like that, improve safety, improving streets, that's just exactly what we're talking about, what I'm thinking of. And then, all these things kind of connect to that. If somehow, obviously we don't have the money to do that all at once, or, but like if we did a little bit and said like, hey, this is from planning, this is from people coming together and working on this, that goes to the implementation thing a little bit, and people can sort of affix their understanding of what we're doing or what the goals of the plan are to a little bit of progress.
Like that. I'm thinking also we could do like so not to be a chapter, but like a section in the comp plan that's just implementation and public participation. So we have kind of also notes of what essentially a synopsis of the survey, so that that's also in there, so that we kind of have a good basis. The city has a good basis to go back on and say, okay, like this was a concern, but I also like the annual survey idea. And maybe just have it up all the time, and then just pull the results at certain times. Then you don't have to worry about it. The only problem that I can see with that is any sort of staff turnover where it might be somebody's job to to pull that or present it or something to city council. council, then, if that doesn't get delegated, but it's a normal problem anywhere, but.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd also be interesting in like that same concept of like how we kind of implement some of these is coming up with like, it doesn't need to be comprehensive obviously, but like coming up with more of an actual list of like funding sources that the city council should look at. Because I feel like so often we're broad and like we should work with the county or we should work with the state, like maybe like having a list of like what grant programs exist or like where money has come from previously. Because I feel like someone in this said like instead of waiting for development to happen to improve sidewalks, like we should look for like grant money to improve sidewalks or like find other ways.
Yeah, if they don't know to look for the Safe Routes to School grant for sidewalks, then how would they know?
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah, and I think that would also help staff in that pursuit of funding, because like I feel like sometimes we know of something, but unless we say it out loud or have it written down, then no one actually else knows about it.
Yeah, the institutional knowledge that's just
Yeah.
locked in one person's brain.
Yeah.
Um, 56% of the respondents rated the draft vision statement, which was basically celebrating history, walkability, local business, and inclusivity, as a 4 out of 5 on the 5-point scale, which is pretty good overall. Problem with this statistic is it's not very helpful. But visioning statements are really hit or miss. Like, most people, they almost have to be generic because otherwise they're not attainable. And so it's this really big, like, balance of trying not to make it too specific so that you can reach that goal, because it's a 20-year plan that we revisit every 10 years now. Which is why nobody feels like we do them anytime, because we revisit every 10 years. But yeah, so that was a really interesting statistic for me. Did you guys have any thoughts in regard to the vision statement itself or the feedback that we've received for that?
It's funny, I read it earlier, but I can't remember what page it was on.
Somebody's comment on it?
Yeah. Let's read the beginning.
It's on page 12. It's at the top, it's all bold. Says, on a scale of 1 to 5, how well does this statement reflect your vision for Tenino's future? In 2045, Tenino is a vibrant small town that celebrates its artisanal history. Our community is integrated with the natural landscape and carefully stewards its resources. Our lively, walkable downtown supports local entrepreneurs and provides the retail services and amenities our residents need. Our community is welcoming to all.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm like, I don't feel like anything else we could shove in there would make it like would.
Kind of covers all the bases.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the most, really, like, most of our responses are 3 and above, which really, to me, means that most everybody liked it, right?
Yeah.
So like, roughly 14% didn't like it,
Yeah.
so that's
Mhm.
Yeah.
Tenino's current strengths are community feel and small town charm, historical identity, parks and nature, safety and low crime. All sound good to me.
Mhm.
That's a feel good question.
Yeah.
This one's less so. What would make Tenino better? Um, suggestions include, more affordable housing and housing diversity, which is pretty common across the board right now. Better roads, sidewalks, and crosswalks. More restaurants, shops, and family activities. Downtown revitalization and tourism promotion. Improved public transit, especially to Olympia. And stronger local economy and job opportunities. So really, it sounds like, as a planner perspective, it sounds like people they don't want it to be a bedroom community. They want it to be a community that they can do absolutely everything they need to in here, while also keeping that small town charm.
Hmm.
Just,
That's challenging.
yeah,
Yes, yeah, that's
challenging
complex.
is a really great word for that. But I think that, Tenino has done a really good job thus far in regard to kind of, promoting all of the things, like getting, essentially promoting all of the, the economic vitality that we can bring in, while also maintaining that small town kind of feel. But again, thoughts.
I feel like they didn't completely give up on the bedroom community thing with the improved public transit bit, but yeah.
I did think it was interesting that there was so much response that included tourism promotion, because like it is something that used to like kind of exist with like oh my gosh, I can't remember what they used to
The
call it,
scenic
but
byway or the bountiful byway.
yeah, like the Bountiful Byway, and then also when like Oregon Trail Days brings in people, and then they used to do, Adam Craig used to play in the park every summer. Can't remember what they called that, but I feel like there were those opportunities, but we never had places for those people to stay, which made it very difficult for those tourism promotion activities to exist and thrive. Because it's like that happy balance of like, you need someone to have the ability to stay here so that way they can come and visit, but then also there is a nightmare happening in the United States of all of the rental housing is short-term rentals. So like, how do we find a happy medium?
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like, I don't know. Like, in my personal opinion, I would rather have a hotel than have 40 Airbnbs. Like, that is just my personal opinion, because I feel like the Airbnb market is ruining housing prices, where at least a hotel, it's one thing.
There's a small hotel slash B&B, I don't know what you'd call it, in a town about the same size as Tenino and Roslyn. It's called, I want to say it's called the Spruce Moose. It's got like 4 or 5 rooms and then like a little kitchen in the main floor. It's pretty cute. But something like that would blow up Tenino, I feel like.
Yeah.
So like B&Bs, like small, kind of maybe look at the regulations or put in some sort of policy for like looking at regulations for like hotels and B&Bs and stuff like that, and leave out essentially language for like short-term rental kind of stuff.
Yeah, when my mom has come to stay, we've looked at Airbnbs in town, and it's kind of, even for Airbnb or for like the plague of short-term rental stuff, the options are pretty limited here.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I don't know, I haven't been keeping up with like best practices for promoting non-short-term rental stuff,
Yeah.
but I imagine like, given the dearth of like any kind of lodging, something like that, if we could encourage it, would do well.
Yeah. Well, I feel like with the expansion of the park, like there will be more opportunities of people coming in. Like if we are putting all this money into the baseball fields, like people are going to come for baseball tournaments if that's the intended plan. And again, there's nowhere for those people to stay, so they're either staying in Tumwater or they're staying in Grand Mound. And like it's not bad that they're not staying here, but it's a missed opportunity. And like finding the happy medium of still not destroying the housing market because of Airbnbs, but like finding an opportunity for those people to stay in town. Plus that brings lodging tax dollars into the community.
I mean, we have events that would fill up a small hotel probably, but keeping it in business in between those
Yeah.
times is the challenge, I guess, and as we get more
Yeah.
and more things going on, maybe that becomes more feasible,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
It's the way I kind of look at it is, you know, you got to have that economic driver to have somebody set
Yeah.
something up, right? The reason Airbnb might be so appealing to many people is they have enough money to put down on a house,
Yeah.
and you know it's an investment for them because they have a significant amount of cash laying around. The Airbnb pays for most of the mortgage, but again, at the end of the day, it's an investment for them,
Yeah.
right? So if you are, let's say, going to put in a small motel sort of thing, you've got, let's say, 12 rooms, right? It's 12 rooms. Are you going to be able to fill those 12 rooms?
Yeah.
50% of the year even, given the events that we currently host around here. I mean, yes, you're going to fill it up during, you know, maybe times like Oregon Trail Days, or you know, people coming to visit family, like you mentioned. But is there that much of a driver? And if there's not that much of a driver, then, I mean,
Yeah.
we can say,
Yeah.
we can say, hey, I'd really like a hotel as much as
Yeah.
we want, but it doesn't make any business sense to anybody.
Yeah.
So,
For sure. Yeah, no, the example I was thinking of in Roslyn, like, they had, you know, I don't know if it was a restaurant or just like a small thing on the main floor that I think was more stable, in terms of like getting people in.
mhm.
I don't know if it was coffee or something, some kind of like little sit-down food related thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was only 4 rooms. It was like a converted house, basically.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, super small capacity, but yeah.
So begs the question of, would somebody, a developer, potentially be able to come in, do something like, maybe there's a commercial store at the ground level, and then there's like four rooms up top. Do our development regulations right now and our zoning regulations allow for that, excuse me? Cause that really would answer that question of, is that viable? Because if our zoning and development regulations don't allow for it, then it's never going to be viable. It's
Mhm.
never gonna be an option to somebody, which is part of the question, or part of what we're doing right now is when we update the comprehensive plan, we also have to update the development codes to match what our comprehensive plan vision looks like. So we can do a review of, would somebody even be able to do that? Is that something that the city wants to see? Which they're pretty popular. I really love the small like B&Bs, hotel-y kind of things. There's a cool ones where they're like winery and a B&B, stuff like that, where it's like kind of combining of like different uses. So that can definitely be something that we look into.
To be clear, I think residential over commercial is allowed. we were talking about that with the previous staff as well. And the big problem was we do have a 35-foot height limit in the city. And for reference, I think they said that the Masonic building was 35 feet.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
That's the
so-
highest one.
Tallest building in town.
Tallest, yeah.
So, for those of us who are still on the planning commission, it was kind of decided, hey, we kind of like that 35-foot height limit, at least here in the downtown.
We could do what we were describing with a retail or a restaurant or something on the ground floor and have rooms, a limited number of rooms up tops. You could do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Or if even we look at like staying within the conceptual idea of 35 feet, if it's like, I've seen some places where they say basically the bottom, if it's a mixed use building and the bottom is a public entity, or not a public entity, but a public facing entity, so like a restaurant or a store or whatever, then you can build, most places it's 2 stories above it, as long as it stays within a certain height. So like it ebbs and
Mhm.
flows on the 35 a little bit, but it still stays within that conceptual idea.
We do allow for residential over commercial. Where it gets wonky is the uses. Because residential as a use, cool, like somebody can live over their shop or their store or whatever, right? But having a B&B is a different use than
Mhm.
just living there as the owner.
Sure.
So looking at that, I don't know what that looks like, in your guys' in the tonight code, so.
Okay. I think that'd be good to clarify if we don't, if
Yeah.
we're not entirely sure.
I think there's something weird like the owner has to live on site or something for a B&B here. Something strange like that.
That would be strange. That's really common in like mobile home parks, but or like where that somebody has to live on site, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Good to clarify.
Housing preferences and concerns. It sounds like most preferred single family housing with a whopping 84%, and also like the cottage style housing at 50%.
Bless you.
Which is not really shocking for Tenino, this area in general. Concerns seem to be a strain on infrastructure and rising property taxes, traffic, and an environmental impact. Well, we always have to consider environmental impact, which is one of my favorite things about development. I'm not being sarcastic, actually. That's what I went to school for. Everybody's concerned with rising property taxes. It's definitely always a concern. The strain on infrastructure to me is a really interesting call out because it seems to me like generally that means that there's not a good understanding of what capacity and level of service that we can and do currently provide and what that looks like. The comp plan actually answers that question, which is great. But maybe make that knowledge a little bit more local, help that like get better conveyed, might help with that understanding. Do you guys have any questions or comments in regard to that?
For that one, I just thought it was interesting because, like, when you look at the graph on page 20, then the responses, like single family home is like clearly blew everyone out of the water with 57 people saying that. But then really like cottage houses, duplex, and townhomes were all not relatively in the same number, but they were all pretty close compared to the rest of the options. Because you had cottage house with 34, but then duplex with 30 and townhome with 27, where I feel like the cottage house and the duplex are close-ish to the same idea. Like they're not the same idea, but they're close-ish. Where obviously like a townhome, when people drive through Tenino, they can see the townhomes and have a different feel than the duplexes on the other end of town.
Yeah, I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, I think you're correct in regards to the vision testing how many respondents really loved cottage housing, but not ADUs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're very similar. It's a very similar concept of you just have a lot of small houses in one little area, and then a lot of times that like promotes walkability because you'll have like a separate kind of parking lot, but you'll walk to, and it's almost like all those houses are in like a parking or in a park.
Mhm.
And so you have this like very like open space where it's generally really green and landscaped, and then you have like insert number of houses like here, right?
Mhm.
They're like described in the same way a condo is sometimes, right? Like I've seen listings for those in other cities where they're like, it's like a condo arrangement kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen those too. It was so weird to see one time. I was like, what do you
When I
mean?
thought it was also interesting that cottage housing had such a response, but then courtyard apartments had like the exact opposite, where
Yeah.
they are again, like part of me was like, I wonder if the word apartment
Yes.
was instantly like, oh,
Yeah.
nope, we don't want that.
Yeah.
And then cottage housing, people were like, oh, well, it's housing. Like, we like that.
Yeah.
Like, it was kind of interesting. I would have loved to be on the fly on the wall of like, I'm a big sociology nerd. So like, what was going through people's head when they chose one thing over the other?
Yeah.
Because like, even cottage housing could be a condo, or could be like a long-term rental.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to actually be owned by someone. That's just the concept.
But I think what's interesting here is that duplex got such a high rating, but multiplex didn't,
Yeah.
right? Essentially, it's the same concept.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit larger footprint, but it's the same concept of, you know, multiple units, same building, together, maybe almost like a townhouse sort
Yeah.
of situation.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
like I've seen multiplexes that look like a normal house, just have 3 doors on them.
Yep. Yeah. So I think what this is showing is that there's a lot of people in Tenino that want more of that sort of suburban feel,
Yeah.
right?
That
Single
cohesive
family.
look.
Yep. Duplex. Yeah, for sure, some cottage housing. You know, just because it's maybe more of a cozy look, but it's all independent. Which is it is kind of interesting. So the city council meeting last night, TRPC came by, and they were talking about sort of this concept that they're trying to work with, and it's the idea that don't sprawl, build up, right? Make everything that you're doing more dense
Yeah.
around the urban center. And what we're finding in this survey is that
People don't want
the people of Tenino don't want that.
that. Yeah.
They're like, let's everybody keep our elbow room here. So, anyway, that's fascinating. I just
Yeah.
wanted to bring that up. So,
Yeah. I think this says that everyone enjoys having a backyard.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think the comp plan probably already said it, but I think this really just goes to like, no matter what type of expansion of housing we do, like, people want it to look cohesive to what we already have, and like, how do we allow different types of residential development while also keeping the cohesive feel that people want. And I think personally, I feel like that is not more important, but that is the main thing that I'm reading this as, because of the inconsistency, which I believe is based on the buzzwording of it, not that that's what happened, but like, I think the goal is to focus more on how we implement rather than what we implement.
Yes. The biggest thing to get that, like, to keep that suburban feel, because we have to balance the use that we allow with the development, right? And so if you say, okay, yeah, we like multiplexes, for example, then anybody can come in off the street and they can build a multiplex as long as it's in, you know, all the regulations, cool. lots of jurisdictions that have designs codes. The problem with them is that it's an extra step in regulatory review, and oftentimes small cities don't want to add that extra step because, well, frankly, it costs money to pay somebody to look at that. So, but that is something that we can absolutely talk about as it's actually implementing a design code. We do have one partially in our historic district, but it's not quite the same.
I don't know if this applies in this situation, but did the state recently offer some kind of like plan guidance for ADUs specifically, like as far as implementation and stuff like that?
Yeah, the Department of Commerce, I know that they at least sent out a 2-pager. They may have a longer document in regard to, I forget what House bill exactly it is, but they have a serious concern in regard to specifically small communities wanting to actually implement it. And so there is guidance. I'd have to look it up, but I can send it your way. Do you want me to disseminate that, or do you want me to send it to you?
That's up to them, they can send it to me.
Yeah.
Send it to us, yeah.
Sorry, can I ask a clarifying question? Like in a good or bad way, they gave directions.
It's the Department of Commerce, so they try to use very you have to do this way. It's very much a, hey, if you want to do this, awesome, we recommend it, here's all the reasons why this is a great thing, here's how you can do the thing, here's some suggestions, here's some examples. Generally, most of their documents are like that. It's essentially like, here's all the rules and regulations that says that, yeah, you should probably do this, or you are required to do this, and or if you want to do this, and then the rest of the document is just kind of like, here's some ways to do it.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, most of their guidance is amazing. I've read their critical area ordinance handbook. It's gonna sound really weird, but I've read that like 4 times. It's actually really interesting. Not light reading. Infrastructure and transportation. They said the main issues were potholes, lack of sidewalks, poor connectivity, and unsafe intersections. Some of the suggestions received were traffic lights, roundabouts, better public transit access, and safer pedestrian routes.
I think the funniest thing is, if we put I say this with all the love for this community, if we put a traffic light in this community, people would be outraged.
Yeah.
Like,
There was like a comment on one of the other things that was like, no traffic lights.
yeah,
Like, this is a good thing. We have no traffic lights.
yeah,
No traffic lights, but roundabouts, yes.
yeah.
Sign me up.
No.
I like roundabouts more than traffic lights. I'll be fair.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the illusion of choice.
Yes.
It feels like, oh, I can go now or I can wait.
Yeah.
I mean, a roundabout right there would
Yeah.
shave like an average of 1.5 minutes each way off my
Yeah.
commute or something. Like,
Mhm.
Yeah, you have not lived in this community when I-5 is shut down. Good luck getting through.
Yeah.
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 But I do think like including roundabouts in our comp plan will be important because like the city of Yelm just got WashDOT to pay for, well, that whole area got 3 roundabouts that were all paid for by WashDOT, and it's all on 507. So I think
Oh,
really
wow.
in the long term, like we can now tell WashDOT it's our turn.
Yes.
yeah, hell yeah. Oh, excuse me.
We need
Was
at
that?
least- at least
I
two.
love your enthusiasm. Was that like a transportation appropriation
Yeah,
sort of thing? Somebody had to go out for it.
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's because
We can work.
they put it at the like the alternative routes for I-5, which is 507.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, how can we jump on board that
Yeah.
momentum
Yeah.
somehow?
Well, budget issues
well, no, they kept it in this
in the
budget, so,
state.
yeah.
Oh, they did. They did. Okay. Well, hey.
Yeah.
Maybe they're feeling a little flush in the transportation
Yeah.
budget this year.
Yeah.
I gotta say, the Trosper roundabout is so sick. I've really
That's so
enjoyed
funny.
it. Big
Mhm.
improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I think those couple issues, when their issues are bad, so to eliminate them will be very beneficial.
Okay, I've got a note for including roundabout language in there. Anything else for infrastructure and transportation?
I mean, a roundabout would presumably include crosswalks,
Yeah.
which I feel like the safety thing, I hear about this all the time, is getting across to Market Fresh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's no sidewalk there.
is
No.
insane. I see kids like running across, I'm just like, oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very rough area to try to cross the road.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like when we get to the climate plan, like we can't encourage people to walk places if we don't have safe streets. Like the fact that if you live on one side of town, you're driving to the grocery store on a sunny day is so silly. But it's because we don't have sidewalks everywhere. We don't have accessible crosswalks. Like I think you pointed out before, like there's not a crosswalk to the park. So like how do we expect people to walk there when they don't feel safe crossing the street there?
Surely this is all in there already, though. I mean, specific areas that we've talked about for
Yeah.
years about where there aren't crosswalks and where there should be. This is an implementation thing, I think.
Well, I just feel like there's so many grants and like funding opportunities out there for some of these things that
Commerce has a searchable grant website, don't they? Searchable grant database.
I think so.
I believe so.
I've not used it, so I don't know for sure if it's Commerce.
Something I heard of
But-
recently.
That sounds like something Commerce would have, yeah.
Yeah.
Searchable,
I believe that's a thing.
I wouldn't be surprised. Grant website. I also really like I really like the idea of having like a list of, like grant, programs, and opportunities so that it makes it easier for, city staff and commission members and council members to kind of look at all of that, and residents to voice their opinions.
Yeah, then you don't have to discover it again for the
You don't
first
have to
time
do
every,
Yeah,
do
it's
that.
every time, you know.
It's a resource, we're adding
Yeah.
to the resource, which is the comp plan.
And you can keep going after those grants for like sidewalks or whatever until you're done.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because like the community development block grant, the city, South Thurston County gets it every 2 years, and that can be used for transportation and infrastructure and those types of things.
Yeah, the CDBG.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really popular grant.
Yep.
Pretty competitive, but really good if you have an actual design, like idea, like a vision for the community, and you have a need that, and can argue that point, it's really good.
Even if we did 2 sidewalks a year, or a crosswalk every other year, like a step in the right direction.
Anything is better than nothing.
Yeah, looks good, feels good, progress, right?
Okay, moving on to access to services. 40% of respondents felt like they can access everything they need within the city. But the gaps include public restrooms, senior and youth services, medical care, and internet/cell service. I think we only have one provider in Tenino.
For what? Internet?
Internet?
No, the Tenino telephone company and like Comcast or
Mhm.
whatever it's called, Xfinity.
The phone company does internet?
Yeah, they have fiber optic too, so it's actually faster than Xfinity.
I'm not shocked by that. Okay, the Tenino what?
Telephone company.
Thank you. My brain said that was too simple of a name.
Yeah,
to
right.
be correct.
It's been around for a long time.
It used to be Scatter Creek, right?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's, I don't know.
I am very interested in why public restrooms came up
Yeah.
so much. Like, where are people going that there's not accessible public restrooms? Because the park has public restrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they,
Grocery store has a public restroom.
Yeah.
are the park public restrooms new?
No, there are a variety of
Are they-
restrooms over there. Some
Oh,
are
really?
old and some
There's
are
the
new.
one that's like a hut, that's like kind of next to the parking lot, or across from the parking lot, kind of. It's,
The parking lot, which one?
oh,
Like the paved parking lot?
the one that has like the big, sign over it.
Oh yeah. Over by
Yeah,
by the
yeah, okay.
playground.
Yeah, that one was updated relatively recently.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't even know it was over there.
The one in the old park, is that even open?
Mm.
Yeah.
And then there's one between the baseball fields.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's one at the concession stand.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
open.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the biggest hurdle with public restrooms is typically the manpower that goes into maintaining and
Mhm.
cleaning,
Yeah.
because people aren't always respectful
Yeah.
to public facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Um,
strange.
But yes, that was an interesting one.
Yeah. I did think the senior and youth services wasn't actually like a good call out, because there is nowhere really for youth to go for organized activities. Like, they can obviously go to the park and that's an incredible resource, but like,
Schools aren't, they don't do a whole lot.
no,
Right.
not like after school programs. Like,
Giants.
there's one program, but not really.
No, the I think summer camp for me, when our son is, we're looking for stuff, it's kind of crazy how little there is in South County.
Gotcha.
And, the park is such a great meeting place, and any kind of like, organization to that here, or encouragement of that here would go a long way.
Yeah.
There's a huge need for it.
Well, I'd be interested in see how like we could incorporate like, because I know that Tenino Young at Heart Theater has talked about, I don't know what their actual plan is, but essentially a theater for years, and there's been different discussions of like little community centers, or potentially the school district having like some sort of community center. So like how we could incorporate like that collaboration in, or even talking to like the Nisqually or the Chehalis tribe. Cause I know like Grand Mound, Rochester area, their big thing is always they don't have community spaces either. So like a community space in Tenino would be well utilized by many, I believe. Well, I'll keep talking. The medical care I also think was interesting, but I feel like there will be expanding opportunities, because like, oh my gosh, what is it? I can't remember what group it is, but there's a group opening a couple clinics in Yelm in the next couple weeks. So like, I feel like as they start to look at more of the whole picture, like Grand Mound or Tenino should hopefully be on their radar of like where the community need is. So I hope that.
Are you thinking that means like an emergency medical?
No, not necessarily like a whole hospital, but
Like a
maybe
walk-in clinic.
yeah, like a walk-in clinic.
Micro
Or,
clinics have been pretty popular in development lately.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of them pop up across the state.
cause a lot of people are using like a clinic as their normal doctor,
Mm-hmm.
because it's easier for them to like go than to try to find an actual like normal everyday doctor.
Either that or like, when you, even if you have a everyday doctor, when you get sick, you call your doctor and you can't get you in for 2 weeks. Doesn't really help if you're sick now.
Yeah.
So going into, like, at least for me, like, I'm a parent, right? When the daycare says I have to get something diagnosed as non-contagious, I can't wait 2 weeks to get it into. I have to work, and so I have to take her to a urgent care clinic.
But as long as your insurance pays for that urgent care, but if it doesn't, it's really expensive even to get like a prescription for something that's pretty mundane or pretty common, like
Yeah.
antibiotic or something. It could cost you like $300 or more to just see a doctor for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. But on the flip side, it's cheaper than going to the ER.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Most things are cheaper than going to the ER,
It's true.
and you don't have to wait 4 hours.
Yeah.
The system being as screwed up as it is, like, anything is better than nothing still.
Yeah.
An option is better than no option.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Climate concerns, top risks, were extreme weather events. If we could not get golf balls sized hail, that'd be great. Flooding and drought. 44% are somewhat too extremely concerned about climate impacts, which is actually a pretty significant, like, that's a pretty high number
It
of
is.
people, especially for a smaller community that are actually concerned about climate impacts. And then residents want to protect the historic buildings, parks, green spaces, and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
But not their own houses.
I always find this to be so interesting because, like, I want to say just a year and a half ago, like, the state implemented WUI, which then got kicked out for a minute. But, like, that immediately said that anyone who had green space was immediately at a higher threat level for, like, wildfire. So then it's always interesting when we talk about climate concerns and climate change, like, the next big, like, you can have whatever concern of what actual event's going to happen, but then the big push is still protecting green space, which makes total sense. Like, I'm all for protecting green space, but, like, when we have inherently trees everywhere and then have a drought, you're gonna be more likely to have a fire spread. So I think it's that balance of, like, community want and community safety that always comes into play, and it's interesting to see how people fall on that. Because I think personally, Tenino would be willing to have a little bit of that risk to continue to have the beauty of the green space that we have.
Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head. I know the county has an adopted hazard mitigation plan, which does cover some information regarding Tenino. I don't know off the top of my head if Tenino has an adopted hazard mitigation plan or if they adopted the county's by proxy. Do you know?
I don't know if we don't have our own. I mean, there may be one that's been sitting on a shelf for 3 years, but it's not,
Well,
it's not up to date, but.
The conservation district is currently doing the, like, replacement WUI, which is the community wildfire preparation plan,
Yeah.
and they're in, like, final stages of that.
I know we get into this in the climate element a bit in regard to the different hazards and what the threat level for those hazards in our community specifically are. But that would be really interesting to know. 'Cause I think that's really how the city's gonna balance the wants versus the safety aspect.
I think drought and fire are probably the number one things. We're up close to the top of the watershed here and our soil is really well drained, so short-term flooding like during the event, but usually it's gone pretty quick.
Yeah, that's most of these responses here, page 49 and 50 and 51. Either, I mean, the lion's share is like, I'm not concerned about any climate-related vulnerabilities. Most of them say that. The other, maybe quarter say, hey, I'm worried about fire. A lot of references to Southern California, those fires we saw down there, which 49, 50, and 51. Some talking about tree management as well. They're worried about that.
Again, sociology brain, but it'd be interesting if people said that flooding, like didn't mention flooding as the top concern because we're so used to it. Like every time it rains, that corner's flooded and that corner's flooded and that corner's flooded. Like everyone knows the 3 corners to drive slow around when it's raining because you know you're gonna hit a puddle. So like it's interesting to me that it's not the top concern, but I also understand why it's not because it's so common.
It's almost like a complacency,
Yeah.
because it's just an existence now.
Yeah.
And like that ties into the infrastructure thing too, because it's a lot of it is just getting the drainage, you know, the funding to get ditches and roads improved and stuff.
Well, one individual somewhere around here said that flooding was one of their significant concerns because just about every way out of town has some sort of flood issue.
Oh yeah, here on 51, the third to last.
Yeah, that's where I saw it. Yep.
Yeah, we'll all be trapped.
Anyway. Good comments.
And then demographics, and these are more interesting. Most respondents were 35 to 54 years old. 83% actually lived in Tenino. 71% shop or use services here. 53% have lived in Tenino for over 10 years. And many plan to stay long-term for life, depending on taxes, affordability, and growth impacts. People want to come and they want to stay,
Mm-hmm.
which is always good for especially small cities. I think especially as the push from the state level in regard to increasing housing and also the understanding that right now, at least, it looks like everywhere is going to have essentially a lot more population growth than most of us can handle. There's an overall concern with just making sure, I don't even say concern, just an overall understanding that if we want to keep it small, then we need to, or like that small town feel, then we need to make sure that that is what are we looking at in regard to the comprehensive or holistic view of that and what that looks like for our city. Is that aesthetic? Is that, you know, is that what we bring in, you know, who we're bringing in, what does that look like for us, essentially, is what I'm trying to convey.
So, just about everywhere that I've seen any sort of projection on growth, what is, and maybe this is a dumb question for a planning commission, but what seems to be driving that growth, especially the areas like Tumwater, Olympia, Lacey, and then down here into the South County? Like, what are the things driving this growth? Because I would expect like Seattle to be experiencing some sort of growth. or maybe not at all, right? I would expect things to be flat mostly, because are we experiencing a massive population influx from another state? Like, what is driving that growth?
I've not read OFM's official report, which does technically go into it, because if you want some very heavy, dense reading, read that report.
Okay. I might have
It's
to go
available
do that.
publicly. But my understanding is that communities like Tumwater, Olympia, Lacey, Yalm, a lot of their growth is actually military. It's a lot of people being stationed at JBLM and choosing to live off base because on base housing is not great. And the military pays them to live off base. So, there's benefits. For us, I think we get a lot of people who are tired of that, like, big town, big city, like, life. They want some place that they can go and feel like they're actually settling down, that they have a sense of community, because I think that as populations shift and grow in a lot of the larger places, that sense of place is lost. And so what happens is there's a constant shift of people who come here, right, to small cities because they want that sense of community, they want that sense of just small town kind of historic aspects. And then there's also at the same time, there's that shift of, like, for example, most teenagers don't want to live in a small town, right? It's not interesting to them. And so you have that aspect of, like, okay, well, maybe they'll go off to college and they're going to go live in Seattle for a couple years. But if you then maybe at that same point, they might get to 34 years old and they're like, you know what, really sounds good. Walkability of just going downtown and just being in a safe spot and going back to, my roots. So I think a lot of that plays into it. Personally, that is all of my own personal opinion in regard to what generally is driving population shifts right now. I also think part of it is that while telework has gone down significantly, it's still a lot more prevalent than it ever was, and hybrid work is also a lot more prevalent than it ever was. And so that gives a lot of people that ability to live further out from their workplaces, because people typically don't mind driving an hour if they have to, once or twice a week. If it's every day, most people don't want to, spend 10 hours of their life every week commuting. But if you can come and live in Tenino and you'll only have to drive to Tacoma or Kent or something like that once or twice a week, makes it a lot more
Appealing.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I feel like COVID shifted the way people want to live their life, which shifted a lot of that, like, work-life balance. So I feel like so many people are focused more on the life aspect than the work aspect, which, before 2020, I don't know how we lived, because after it's so different, but, like, there are so many aspects of, like, I want to live somewhere where I want to live first, and then I'll find a job around that, rather than I want this dream job and then I'll figure out housing around that.
Also, we're a climate refuge, generally speaking. There's people moving here from places where, their natural resources are drying up, their water is running out, or they just have the perception that we'll be safer.
Yeah. Well, I think at the same aspect, we're kind of like a political refuge. Like,
Yeah.
as much as people say they're moving away from Washington because of the politics, I feel like same time people are moving to Washington for the politics. I know a lot of people who've moved here from Florida.
Sure.
I know quite a few women specifically who have moved here from Texas.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's all really good points. The
if you have a draft, like, if, as we get closer to the next meeting is gonna be the draft? Okay, perfect, that's what my question
Yeah,
was.
'cause it's a hefty document. Yeah, it'll be fun. But yes, I'm hoping I'll get it out at least a week out, but I'm really hoping for 2 right now. So. Also because I got plans at the end of next month and I don't wanna.
Okay, well, moving on to new business. I'm excited to introduce Valerie Roberts, prospective planning commission candidate here. So if you guys want to, maybe you could stand up and tell us a little bit about yourself, I guess, and yeah.
In the microphone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great, so if that's on.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Valerie. I moved to Tenino 3 years ago after a journey of discovering where I wanted to live for the rest of my life. I work for the city of Olympia. My job is to help them take their historic 1939 armory and turn it into an art center. It is a very cool job. Before that, I joke that I lived on I-5. I grew up in Southern Oregon, and my background career is in museums, so art and natural history museums, running public spaces and helping people kind of get access to their own personal history and art and opportunities to connect with each other. And I love what I do. I chose to live in Tenino because I grew up in a rural area, and I always knew that that's how I wanted to live when I raised my children. I have a 3.5-year-old named Iris. She's very cool. And we also really like natural spaces. We like gardening, and my mother lives with us. We have a multi-generational household, and Tenino is a perfect place. It's just a great place to live. It's very accessible. We love taking the trail. We love the park. I love that this town is basically half park. That's impressive. And everyone here has been so welcoming, and it's been really great. Now that I've had some experience working for a city, and also with the dedication to the city in developing a creative center and you having a creative district, even though you're a small and mighty creative town, really excites me, and I'd love to be a part of developing that process and help grow this town. I'm also really inspired by, so in Southern Oregon, there's a town called Jacksonville, Oregon. They're a town of 2,000 people, and they're the gateway to the Applegate Valley, which is a beautiful place. But they, huh?
I love Jacksonville.
I know, I love Jacksonville too. I used to work at a coffee shop there and a farm stand that sold pumpkins. Very fun. But they have such a vital downtown. They have an ice cream shop, they've got an Italian restaurant, they got a little mini boutique hotel, and they have the Brit Music Festival. So they have this wonderful annual, I got to see the B-52s there, right? And I think that Tenino has the same type of charm, where it's dedicated to history, dedicated to the arts, has a lot of really wonderful assets, has a lot of like outdoor recreation opportunities, lots of biking, and I just think that there's a lot to this town. I'd like to watch it thrive. It's very cool. Anyway, you can ask me questions about myself, my work, what I'd like to do, or what I'd hope to do. Happy to answer them.
Sorry, I'm looking up Jacksonville right now.
Oh, it's so cute.
Because I like to road trip, and this sounds like a fun little road trip.
10 out of 10. You can go to White's Country Farm and go say hi to my old boss.
Okay.
Get some coffee. I don't think it's called Stem Coffee anymore. Also, it's right next to Ashland, so if you like theater, there's the Shakespeare Festival. And I know, and there's
hot springs.
hot springs, there's wineries, there's everything. Actually, growing up there, I thought it was boring, and then I went back as an adult, and I was like, wow, this is a nice place. Wow. So.
I have a lot of friends who live in Williams, which is
Oh, yeah.
like half an hour north or hour north.
Mm-hmm.
But like same on the other end of the Applegate Valley, basically.
Yes, I love the Applegate. Up there is the Illinois River, 10 out of 10 swimming.
Yes, the wilderness. Was it the? My wife and I stayed there, camped out right on the edge of the protected, like that you can't go in with anything more than like a donkey.
Oh, yes, yes. There's the Rogue River has that too. They have like a no biking, no motor vehicle, natural reservoir area. It's very fun. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll ask a question. So, based on some of the conversations that we're having tonight,
Yeah,
I don't know if you filled out the survey.
I did.
Okay, cool. So what do you think about the idea of like hotels and events and stuff in the city? Do we have that capacity? What's some of your views on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do think that you have the capacity, although I think that with any town that invests in tourism, you have to be able to support the businesses through the whatever seasonal slump you have. So if you're a ski town, you'll have a seasonal slump. Here, I think that we would have probably a wintertime slump. But I do think that you have the diversity of experiences that would be able to lend itself to the hotel industry. You're far enough away from town that it can be a getaway/retreat. You have a creative arts group that can develop programming throughout the year, which is pretty impressive. You have outdoor recreation. You're right on the Tenino Trail, which goes to the Western Chehalis, so you could get into the biking or the mountain biking community. You could become like a destination. You also have agritourism. You've got Latin County Cider Mill nearby. You're developing the ag complex here. You have an alpaca farm that does tours and is a fiber mill over in Yelm. Like, you could integrate into something where you're like the place that people rest, but there's, you don't need to pull the full weight of the experience because you're settled within a really cool community.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, like, you have Great Wolf Lodge nearby, which children love and parents don't love too much to go stay there because it's overwhelming. So you could imagine where like you could be like, oh, you get a Great Wolf Lodge day pass and your kids are happy, but the parents are like, I'm gonna have like a quiet retreat experience. Like, there's a lot of potential, and because you have a diverse range of potential experiences, I actually do think that the town could possibly hold a hotel and be pretty successful. I do think that it would have to be lifted up with more restaurants and more breakfast opportunities, although the Sandstone is great. I think that people would want to have kind of like multiple experiences. I think that it would be worthwhile to do a little bit of research in like similar towns and even reach out to them and ask, like, if in living memory you've done this, how did it go? Or like what kind of lessons were learned? Because I'm sure that they'd be willing to share. Yeah, good question.
All right, you're hired. I'm good. That's all I needed to hear. Yeah.
I know Valerie, so.
We know each
yeah.
other. We're part of leadership Thurston County together.
I thought you were the reference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Won't hold it against you, though.
Sounds good.
Do we need to do, what do we need to do officially, really?
I'd say send something to the council saying, recommend that we.
Okay.
Remember, we got in trouble one time because we didn't send something official to the.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Send out just to say that the council was going to recommend moving it forward.
Whatever you want to make a,
Sure. I move to send a recommendation to the council to approve Valerie to the planning commission.
I'll second.
Second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hooray!
Yay.
Thank you. I was
You made it
expecting
pretty
an
easy.
interrogation. No.
All right, exciting. We're gonna have a full commission. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I know.
Okay, well, do you want to make a comment? No, you're good. Okay, Dave, go
I'm
for
not
it.
speaking on behalf of the city council or the city, really. I just, a couple things you were talking about that I just, from being here on the council and stuff for a while, hotel-wise, when I first became mayor, I had a pretty long visit with Visit Olympia and Beyond. They have some amazing software that they can tell who's coming to this town, when they're here. They can pull, I don't know how they do it, they use cell phone pings or something, they can down pretty,
Yeah.
and tell you when people are here and where they're going. Surprisingly, the biggest draw to our area, I would have never guessed this, is the horse farm. They have events out there, and the people that come there bring their families. A lot of times you'll see all the trailers out there. They may stay, the actual people participating may stay in the trailer there, but what she said is their families want to come and watch, and there's no place for them to stay here.
Yeah.
She said there's overwhelming evidence that there's capacity for a motel in this area now with their information they have. So just something that it may be a resource. We're not part of them anymore, but we may be able to get some information from that program that you can look at just to know. On the implementation part of it that you were talking about, I think when I've been part of a couple of these updates, and we have a whole update for our downtown plan, that we've had for 20 years. This just basically was put together and set on a shelf. I think what I would like to see, if you have priorities in some of these sections, there's some things, potholes for instance, that could just be a pretty easy thing for the city to try to work on, having a better program for pothole repairs. That's a big concern from everybody. So when you put this together, I think if you had some scalability, I don't know what to call it, but some things that are easy to implement, some things that maybe take a longer term, and then something that may take 20 years. If we're going to redo our downtown, that would be nice for us to be able to look at and say, here's some things we can probably do in the next 5 years, do some sidewalk work, do some better potholes. Grants, I think, are great, and we've got a lot of grants in this community, but I think something for you to realize, they're not as easy to implement. I mean, even if you get them, a small town our size, it's just to manage them and implement them, and a lot of times they have things that you don't realize, either a matching grant or there's just other things that are make it very difficult. So it's nice to say, let's get grants for everything, but sometimes getting the grants easier than actually implementing it. So just keep that in mind, I think, when there's got to be, we can't do everything at once. We're not going to get or if we need help, some things we're just going to have to hire somebody to manage the grant, really, I think, for a town our size. So, but that hotel thing I've been trying to push for a while. Everybody I see that I think, it's like, man, we could really use a small, hotel. I even talked about doing it at the ag park. We had property out there, but that didn't go over too well with some of the people that wanted more ag-related stuff. But, so anyway, the motel thing I think is a great idea, and she says there's demand already. It's just finding somebody to do it and understanding what, but that demand is there.
Cool. Let's look at like the obstacles in the code if there are any significant problems with setting up a hotel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and maybe we change the height limitation from 35 to 3 stories.
Probably not.
Well, the
We'll
height
see.
limitation is also partially a fire district response, or fire department
Interesting.
response.
That makes total sense.
Too bad.
Yeah, a fire safety thing. Because they have to have a truck that is they either have to have a truck or, there's like a whole
That makes total sense.
rigmarole in regard to
Yeah.
it. But there is actual logic behind the
Yeah.
35 feet thing that's outside of the planning world. But what are the obstacles regarding development of a hotel motel thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Temp lodging, is that the
Yep.
industry term?
Lodging.
Lodging.
Perfect.
Yeah, please.
Jeff Eisel, City Council. I live on MacArthur Street. Discussion here interesting, or of most interest to me, was the mention about design code. It may be that the resistance to apartments is that the classic look is a box, unattractive. If we had a design code, and there are issues with that made the apartment look more like a craftsman house, like the old style mansions you see in Centralia with multiple dwelling units within it, so that it fits into the character of the town that we like to think we have, which is this old small town, kind of old-fashioned looking buildings. That might be consideration. With the design code, of course, building a structure to craftsman style is more expensive than building a modern style building. So that increases building costs as well as the cost of a design review team. I like that look. I'm a carpenter. I love the old looking houses. If we had a hotel in town that were subject to fire code that were taller than the usual structures, if it also had a look that looked like, you know, a 1920s structure as opposed to a 2025 glass and brick box kind of thing, there may be more support for that in the community. Perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you.
No on the design code. Design codes can be really cool because they can be as vague or as strict. I've seen some really strict design codes, as essentially we want. So we can leave it up to the intent is that it looks similar to other buildings surrounding it. And you can also get as strict as it has to have 3 facade, like it's the whole thing. Like,
Right.
so yeah, you can get very technical into it, or you can also get very like, it just needs to look like other buildings around it.
Yeah.
Which will increase costs regardless, because then you actually have to have the architecture, like the architecture words, the architect, like actually like provide a why am I forgetting the word? Anyway, you have to have them provide an actual look of the building, but it can be relatively lower in cost depending on how strict the design code is as well. That's something to consider.
I think personally, although a design code would be great to keep the aesthetic, I don't know that me being an advocate for this housing crisis that we're living in, I don't know that that is the right step when we are having such a housing shortage. And I think if we do look at a design code, it should only be for units that hold, like we have to decide on how many, like what the threshold is, like if it's 4 more units attached, or if it's a building that has 6 units. Like I don't think any of those those types of housing are coming to Tenino, if I'm being honest. Like I don't see a 20 apartment complex coming to Tenino. Like there's just not the immediate need for it, because that's not what exists here at the moment. I think what's gonna happen is we're gonna have a couple duplexes, a couple townhomes, a couple redevelopments of properties. I don't know that we're gonna have this grand cottage housing pop up, even if we say we want it.
My only my concern with any sort of prescribed look of how development goes in is that it may stifle development that we want. I mean, I guess I could just say, I'm gonna echo what you just said. I'd hate to have anybody come into town and be like, I'd really like to do a fill in the blank, and then be like, oh no, actually it doesn't, you know.
If that's the margin though of a successful build though, is just some sandstone accents and stuff like that, that's probably, I mean, I don't think that's keeping anybody from doing it. Like the townhomes across the street from Parkside that they just built, like, or 9 over there, they're sandstone accents. It may not be like architecturally super interesting potentially, but I mean, they have front porches and sandstone pillars. I think it looks nice. I don't, you know.
Yeah, but they did that without being told to do that.
That's true. That's true, but it didn't
I think if
make the project unfeasible. I mean,
yeah,
obviously.
Are there rules about like maintaining historic buildings in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like the historic district, you can't do
That's
a lot
specific.
of different things.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I was just gonna say, like, maybe some rules about like if you're entering into that district, like then the design code hits, or like a specific
Yeah.
corridor or something. Especially if you're like potentially interfering in space that way, you know, like,
Yeah.
but
Like different overlays. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we can talk about going forward. To your point though, like we can, if the, you know, the concern that the commission has is only that unit or multiplexes and apartments are just not aesthetically pretty, and want to implement a design code just for those, that's completely possible. I mean, pretty much anything like design code, like the design code is what we make it. So we can say, I only want it to affect hotels, motels, and multifamily housing above 4 units, or whatever. You can also say it's down the corridor. It's the same, very similar to the historic preservation, the historic district of like, they just have to look similar, or it has to have sandstone accents, or you know, you can have whatever language you want. It can be as simple as, or as complicated as we want it to be. We can also make it as specific or as broad as we want it to be, or we can also just not do it. All of the above are definitely options, and I like that you guys are thinking about the aspect, and you brought up in regard to the cost for builders, right? So are we, you know, is the overall concern that aesthetically the city is pretty, or is the overall concern is that we'd rather you, like, is the incentive more that we don't have the design code? That's an incentive. You don't have a design code in this area, you don't have to worry about what this looks like. And therefore, if it comes down to whether or not they go to one city that has a design code and one city that doesn't, are they more apt to go to us because we don't have a design code and therefore it's one less thing that they have to worry about? Most big developers don't care. I've worked for larger companies with huge developers. They don't care. When it comes down to it, 350,000 is the same thing as 300,000. They don't care. But the small developers that we typically want to cater to in our town, right, is though they care, they very much care. And so it would be really interesting to like understand what that level, if we wanted to do design code, we absolutely should do a survey and talk to like local, like Olympia Master Builders and local construction companies and developers in regard to what, you know, what they might be interested in or really don't want.
Olympia Master Builders would be a great resource to talk to.
Oh yeah, they're
If,
great.
yeah, if, I don't know, just a thought for me now that we're actually mentioning names of places. Yeah, Olympia Master Builders, getting an idea of what they see. Because I mean, I think that there's areas around town that could be developed, but what's holding people back?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we could get some legit data on specifically, oh, it's too far away from Olympia to even make it pencil, or hey, it's too expensive to connect to the sewer, we can't, you know. Phil, somebody let me know, because I'm sitting here looking at a bunch of, you know, empty property going, why hasn't anybody developed that? What's going on over here?
That would be interesting to know, because we could speculate, you
Yep.
know, here
All
all
day.
day about what may or may not be keeping those lots from being developed, but it's probably not what we think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and we can work on that twofold, so we can put in the economic development chapter. We can put policy in there in regard to having communication and talking to places like Olympia Master Builders or like local developers and like those types of people and places and businesses in regard to what is holding people back from developing in Tenino and having that conversation, while also at the same time
bet the EDC has some stuff too.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
And the Ag Park would have been such a good spot for a hotel, considering like this request,
And
like people.
don't
coming
get
to
them
the horse
started.
farm.
There's still more space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's right across the street from,
Miles Sand and Gravel wants to be annexed maybe potentially too, so who knows?
They want to be honest.
Yeah.
That whole thing was interesting. I have my thoughts on that document. Random thought that popped in my head is with us updating our codes to include the new ordinances around ADUs, I'd be interested. I know that some of the cities have done it, and I know that at a statewide level, I think Commerce is funding like a grant for a couple of the counties to do it, but pre-approved designs to reduce the barriers of actually building ADUs.
We've talked, were you around when we talked about that a little bit? Lacey has them.
Yeah.
They're still really pretty expensive. I mean,
The issue with the Lacey ones is that the state subsequently created pre-approved plans that they're requiring jurisdictions to use that interfere with Lacey's.
Interesting.
And so the Lacey ones, there's like a year's worth that got built that wouldn't pass muster now.
Interesting.
But yeah, the state has, there was a big thing with ADUs that the state did to combat, individual cities saying, no, we don't want this. Like, it's like a, very concrete, like, this is gonna happen.
You have to allow it, yeah.
We need infill throughout the state, like, this is gonna happen, so. And part of that was the pre-approved plans and like very, like, legible standards.
Interesting. Gotcha.
all right. Well,
I got to swear in, no?
yeah.
I'm gonna get you sworn in. Should have done it at the start, but we'll do it. Is that okay with
You-
you, right?
Me?
Yeah, if-
Oh, I don't need to be sworn in anymore. They reconciled the dates and whatnot. I don't think I need to now.
I wanna put this in here for you if you wanted it.
But I don't need to do it again until like 2030. Isn't that what the?
That's not what I was told to do.
Yeah. I feel like for the sake of this,
Say
Okay,
They just take 2 minutes.
swear me in.
who's got a Bible?
Yeah.
Just a phone. There you go.
You gotta stand up.
Oh,
You gotta make this official.
Hey, there we go.
Repeat after me.
okay.
I, William Rutherford,
I, William Rutherford,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Washington,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Washington,
and the ordinance and regulations of the City of Tenino,
and the ordinance and regulations of the City of Tenino,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
perform and discharge the duties of the office of
Oh my God.
impartially perform and discharge the
I
duties
impartially perform and discharge the duties of the office of
Commissioner for the City of Tenino,
Commissioner for the City of Tenino.
Planning Commission number 2, position number 2,
Planning Commission, position number 2.
according to law, to the best of my ability.
My
No,
goodness.
it's a lot.
According to law, to the best of my ability.
That's a
That's the
mouthful.
disclaimer. To the best of my ability. Sorry.
He doesn't do it.
Twisters in
You
there.
can't be sued because it was the best of your ability.
That's right.
We gotta put that language in there.
I did try.
Prove that it wasn't the best of my. It's 8 o'clock on a Wednesday.
All right.
Wonderful.
That's what you have to look forward to if you're ready for that.
Yeah.
Will, did you actually? You never did it either, did
I
you?
just had to sign sign those words.
You might have to do Will's too, because he,
He
we
just signed a
we
piece of
just signed the
paper.
piece of paper for him.
Well,
Yeah, I was gonna come to his first meeting and I forgot, I fell asleep or something, so.
we won't punish you with that.
You can go to a city council meeting and do it at a city council meeting
I
too.
mean, do I have to do it?
Oh, it's an initiation now.
You're gonna have to add some hazing rituals now to our.
Oh my god.
The only reason I wanna do it is because I think if you're getting somebody would come up and challenge this,
Yeah.
they probably get challenged this, and
You're not actually a commissioner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible. Okay. Thanks, Dave. That was good. So with that, meeting adjourned.